shot of soul.
This is Bass Talk Live. Your host, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrack. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Lose, Strike King Lures, Bass Cat Boats, Ducket Fishing, Spro, AFCO, Big Bite Baits, Sunline, and TH Marine. BTL coming at you. Good Tuesday, everybody. Welcome once again to BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Matthew, wow, that's about all I can say, man.
A little less crowded coming in today. I thought it was a little less crowded yesterday, but the drive from Tulsa to Oklahoma City saw even fewer vehicles braving the out of doors.
I think that it's going to get to the point where the only thing that's going to be on the highway is going to be trucks, big 18-wheelers. But we've got a good show today. We're going to have Ken Duke, the managing editor for Fishing Tackle Retailer magazine, get his insight on what this madness, what kind of effect it's going to have on the industry, on the weekend guys, on the casual angler, and just get his take from a retail, wholesale, and manufacturer's aspect on this madness that's taking place with the coronavirus. All right, man. I got a couple of things I want to talk about before we get to Ken. The first thing is, did you watch any of the MLF yesterday?
A little bit of it.
Dude, it was freaking awesome. All right. Now let me tell you what happened. And I don't know how many people saw this. Did you see what Mr. Iaconelli and Gagliardi did the last 15 minutes?
Yeah, Ike went vintage meltdown on a 713.
Oh, did you see that?
He has moved on from headbutting the dash to spitting to yelling in the fish's face, and now he's to fogging the camera with his breath.
Oh, that was just so Ike. Mm-hmm. It really was. But it was good to see because he's kind of struggled.
It is.
A little bit. But that drama that was taking place between 18 to 24th place was just, it was compelling. I mean, I was glued. I got to admit. I know there's not a whole lot else going on, but it was unbelievable what was taking place.
It's really interesting to me, Iaconelli, like you go through how he catches on. You know, he has like catchphrases or certain things that he like goes with that are marketing strategies.
Grass pig.
You know, like he's done this thing lately with he's like, come on, let's fish. And it's stuff like this that, it's kind of hokey, but it like works for him.
Yeah.
And now, the DT6 in the face, and then he said, grass pig in the throat. I got to be honest. I was like, damn, they're still making the grass pig? And then my next thought was, that really is in its throat. That thing ate the grass pig.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, it was vintage Iaconelli. I saw it on the Instagram, and I was like, all right, I got to turn the volume on and watch this because what's coming.
Yeah.
And you know that it's going to be outlandish and over the top, but you take 3 minutes out of your day, and here you've got a guy, I mean, he's getting paid by Pure Fishing, right?
Yeah, and he's performing.
That's what I'm saying. You can say what you want about his antics and fogging it up, but we're talking about a grass pig in its throat on a 713. So mission accomplished for Iaconelli. But yeah, it was interesting. I guess I don't feel like you see very often Jacob Wheeler and Kevin Van Dam and Brent Ayler all missing the cut.
Yeah, and I'm going to try. Let's just say this, all right? I've got a very, very good gut feeling, just a gut feeling, that we're going to get an announcement from Major League Fishing that the remainder of the events that are going to take place in April are going to be canceled.
What makes you say that?
I just got a gut feeling, man, because here's why. When President Trump came out with the directive of groups of 10 or less, that was before everything was going on, all right? So I don't know. I reached out to Major League Fishing, to a representative, and the response that I got was they are currently evaluating the situation.
Bass has not announced anything outside of the Chickamauga cancellation, which marks the first time, I believe, that a tournament has been canceled twice or postponed twice because remember, it was the high water of the Tennessee, and then they rescheduled it, not for their rescheduled date, but so they could keep their rescheduled date open. Dude, you know who's going to benefit on this? I was talking to an Elite Series angler, and he was driving home, and I was like, man, what is this guy? Said, you just going to give Paul Mueller the trophy for 2.5 days of fishing for the Angler of the Year at the end of this? And he's like, no. He's like, I really hope that they backload the schedule when all this rolls over. And he goes, dude, when I started fishing, we fished September, October, November, and it was awesome. And it would be real interesting to see, you know, you'll have a lot of stuff out of the way. There's not going to be a lot of rollover, and you're going to have open weekends to see if we could maybe see an early 2000s throwback tour schedule to where after they do the northern swing, then they roll in and they throw back in Chickamauga and they throw back in Eufaula, and they throw in all these lakes that you can fish on 12 months out of the year, Mark.
Yeah.
So it's not like, you know, you're canceling the northern swing and then trying to do it in November when everybody's got 3-foot ice rods. Yeah. You can go down and fish it. But along that, the Louisville Leader, part of my daily reading. I don't know if it is part of your daily reading, Mark.
No, it's not. It's not.
Unfortunately, there's some special events that have been canceled in Louisville, and this came out 15 hours ago.
You have a list.
In the Louisville Leader. We'll start out with Paws in the Park.
Oh, I'm crushed.
Funny Bunny.
I'm decimated.
Colorpalooza.
I'm hurt.
Mariposas.
Okay.
KTA Jam Session.
Cool event.
Done. All of those done.
Yeah.
And then there's a comma.
Yeah.
And the next line. And the Bassmaster Fishing Tournament. Period.
Interesting. And we have not received any word from Bass on the cancellation of the Louisville Open.
It said attempts will be made to reschedule some activities where possible. Obviously, the second week in April, the first Central Open, they're on Louisville. It said all events, city and private, scheduled through May 10th are canceled, or through this Louisville are canceled. Attempts will be made. It said city parks, including boat ramps, remain open, but pavilion and other rentals are canceled. Refunds can be requested. Now, this is where it could get interesting. You got anybody who's Shin-Fukai-ing this open? If you know what Shin used to do is, you know, live a month at the lake, right?
Yeah, yeah.
No new arrivals will be allowed at Lake Park Campground, but current guests can remain in place. So if it's not canceled and you're there, you got prime pickets in the campground for the next 3 weeks, Mark. But no, I would assume the Bassmaster Fishing Tournament on Louisville Lake refers to the Bassmaster Open, the Central Open, which what you're going to end up with then is, you know, you'll have an Eastern Open that probably gets canceled. You have the Central Open. You've got college events. You have high school events postponed. You're going to have probably 3 Elite Series events, and you can't schedule any of those on top of each other. So you're going to run into a situation where once all this gets done and we can gather and high five, or maybe we can't. Maybe it's a new world that will be, but you know what I mean? You're going to run out of weekends for some of it. I think some of this is going to be hard to get rescheduled.
Yeah, one of the largest trails in Texas, Bass Chance, canceled all their stuff.
Now, they're still fishing in Alabama.
What are they fishing?
At Lake Martin for the FLW Pro Circuit.
That's still going on.
That's still going on. And as of now, the Wheeler Lake and the Lake of the Ozarks Costas, I believe, or Toyotas are still going on.
Yeah. Boy, Costa, they get a lot of money for that, didn't they?
Yeah.
A lot of bank.
Unfortunately, based on the registration, I don't think you have to worry about more than 10 people gathering for those weigh-ins. Numbers are a tad low this year.
Yeah.
Did you see in the Havasu Toyota co-angler, you know, gets a Phoenix with their new deal, right?
Yeah.
Valued at $33,500.
Yeah.
Guy who won the Costa, I can never pronounce his name right. He's a legend out there. He's always at the U.S. Open and stuff. Everyone knows who he is. Yeah, okay.
All right.
He got $26,000. So the co-angler
got more
value than that. Did you see what Big Bass paid?
No.
Take a gander. Big Bass Toyota Series, six
$2,500.
No, lower.
$1,000.
Lower. We're gonna be here.
Oh wow. $200?
Lower.
$100?
Lower. $76 for big bass. That's got it. That can't be good.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens as far as canceling. All right,
a lot of fishing people, though.
Yeah.
Getting a taste of what it's like to be told they're fishing something and then saying that it's canceled. Welcome to my shoes for the last 5 months.
Back to the...
All sorts of shots across the bow there, Mark. I was fired up this morning.
Yeah. All right, back to MLF. My gut feeling, obviously, I had mentioned, I had reached out to them. They're evaluating the situation. You have a situation across the country, too, where bars, restaurants, stores are limiting their hours. I mean, it becomes a logistical
to get
situation.
80 guys in one town. That's, I think, the problem.
Even though they're separate, it still becomes an issue. Here in Oklahoma, they made the announcement yesterday that schools are going to remain closed for an additional 2 weeks, all the way through April 6th. In our hometown my hometown, Norman, they have closed restaurants. They have closed workout facilities. They have closed bars. They have closed just about everything. Bowling centers are closed until April 6th, if not longer.
But I could see that guy texted you. You were like, oh my gosh, they closed a bowling center. I was like, yeah, you've got literally a breeding ground of bacteria in the bowling balls. I mean, it's not like I'm going out to the lake going, here, use my rod. Bowling balls, you got to wipe those things down every single time.
Now, the one thing that they are doing here in Oklahoma, they are really, really pushing carry out and delivery from a food perspective. It's not a matter that the restaurants and all this stuff is running out of food. It's just they are getting very creative in how they are distributing meals to the individuals that are requesting food. I did go to the grocery store yesterday, Matthew. It was not chaos. It was not madness. Were there things that were missing on the shelves? Yes, but there was plenty of food. Everybody was calm. You know, we need to buckle down and get through this thing, hopefully in 4 to 6 weeks, and then hopefully normality will come back. But once again, just a gut feeling. Now, I want to go back to Lake Fork again.
Yeah, sorry, that was a tangent. You started out on how impressed you were with the BPT on Lake Fork. It ended up with...
I want to go back because in the action that I watched yesterday, and if Major League Fishing does cancel the remainder of April, I think there's a good chance that we can get Kevin on the show.
Van Dam?
Van Dam. All right, I think there's a good chance. And what I want to do... I watched a lot of Kevin Van Dam yesterday, and I am just intrigued. We both know that he likes to throw the jerkbait a lot.
Yeah.
But he stuck with it, and he stuck with it, and he stuck with it, and he kept throwing it. How many
pounds
did he... Yeah, how many pounds did he have yesterday? 6?
Hold on.
I think he had 6 pounds.
612 and 2 fish. Are you questioning Kevin Van Dam's strategy live on air, Mark?
Look, I'm going to look dead in the camera.
You got Jason Christie coming after me. I'm going to get Kevin coming after you.
I am not questioning.
You're opening yourself up to all sorts of mystery callers now.
I am not.
This is where I get my comeback right here. Oh, no. Mark, we got a mystery caller on the line.
I am wanting to know.
Mark, this is Kevin. Are you questioning my jerkbait prowess?
Listen to me.
Are you criticizing my strategy on...
I am not the only human being out there that was watching this wondering, why is Kevin still throwing the jerkbait so much?
You're still rolling with it.
I just want to know why. That's all I want to know. Obviously, he had a reason, and he did talk about in the live coverage about how he was absolutely wearing them out in practice. He kept saying, man, and he was catching, I don't want to say shorts. What do you call them? Unders? Under 2 pounds?
Non-scorable bass.
Non-scorable bass is the correct term.
Is the correct terminology.
I'm going to call them unders. He was catching unders. He was catching a lot of unders. And I just want to know. That's it.
Okay, now here's the other crazy thing along with that, with baits, right?
Yeah.
What did Jason Christie catch that 9-pounder on?
Frog?
Yeah. Frog and a lot of the mats and stuff like that. Listen to this in Group B. Guys who... I
got another name, too, I want to get on the show.
Okay. Who's that?
Kelly Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Are you kidding me? I cannot believe he did not make the cut.
310 yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, so listen to this. Cliff Crochet, 40th, 10-15 over 2 days. What does Cliff like to do? Throw the black frog. Right?
Poor Cliff, man.
Dean Rojas, perhaps you've heard of that man before.
Might have.
31st at his round. What does Dean like to do? Throw the frog better than anyone else. Fred Rumbanis. Perhaps you've heard of the Stanford Boom Boom Frog with the Velcro patch on the back.
I know.
All the frog guys the frog guys didn't catch him.
I know. And it looked froggy too, man.
It absolutely did. I mean, I'm looking at these guys. Maybe you've heard of Ish Monroe, the snag-proof frog.
Oh, yeah.
The fat frog, all of that stuff.
He's below the line.
32nd. You've got a frog bite with Jason Christie, showing what it is, and maybe that was a fluke. Maybe that was the only fish that was caught on a frog the whole tournament. But seeing how they were caught back there, I highly fear. And guys who are no longer fishing are Ish Monroe, Cliff Crochet, Dean Rojas,
and
who was the other guy?
Fred Rumbanis.
Yeah. They have their own signature series frogs, every single one of those guys.
Dude, I know, man. All right. Now, I just want to make it crystal clear. I am not calling Kevin out.
Oh, it sounded like you were.
I am not. And it's on the instant feedback,
now the shoe is on the other foot.
People want to know, why did you throw the jerkbait so long? Why? That's all we want to know. There had to be a reason, and I get it, you were catching them in practice, but there had to be a reason. I'm not questioning the greatest angler of all time. I just want to know why the strategy was to keep throwing the jerkbait. And I'm not the only one. You folks tell me. Even if you're listening on iTunes, you tell me. Was it not a little bizarre that the greatest angler in the entire world kept throwing the jerkbait?
Well, no, because I've seen what the greatest angler in the entire world has done with the jerkbait, and he obviously had a reason to think it's not like he was like, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to drop like a rock in the standings while I throw this jerkbait.
No, but dude, we have seen over time how part of the reason why he's the greatest in the world is his ability to adjust.
And oftentimes his greatest ability is to throw the jerkbait and make the jerkbait work.
I know.
Like I said, there's going to be a mystery caller in the next couple weeks.
I am not questioning what he did. I just want to know why.
Heavy hitters is going to take a ton of weight, too. I mean, listen to these weights.
Yeah.
A 10-4, a 9-9, an 8-12, an 8-03, an 8-03, an 8-7, an 8-2, an 8-3, an 8-6, a 10-4.
Yeah.
A 10-8, a 7-30. I mean, every single person caught. Wait, did every single person? Let me look at this. 5, 5, 5, 5s.
Yeah.
Jeff Crete did not catch a 5-pounder this tournament.
Mind-boggling.
Tommy Biffle did not catch a 4-pounder. 1, 2, 3. There's 3 so far.
Yeah.
4, 5. Rojas only caught a 3-9. 6, 7, 8 guys out of 80 did not catch a 5-pounder during their 2 days at Lake Fork.
Wow.
That is strong.
Wow. And I know Fork was a little off.
But it was a little on, too.
Exactly.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do today. Along the MLF BPT headlines, Jeff Sprague was on live, and we got some emails, comments about this where it appeared as though on live that he was bed fishing, and then that he hooked a big quality fish, and it kind of came in sideways. And as it came in sideways, he said it's hooked in the side, and then he kind of shielded it as he unhooked it, and then weighed it, counted it. So I had people like, how can you do that? He's bed. So I did what we do.
Yeah.
Called him. I said, hey.
Got a statement from him,
yeah,
right?
What was the deal here? And he said, dude, this is crazy. He goes, never even thought about this until we got back. And then the MLF officials came over and talked. So what he said he had was, he said, I was sight fishing. He said, I had a couple males on a bed. And he said, I was giving him a break. And he goes, you can watch. He said he chucked his weightless stick bait out into open water. He said 10, 15 feet off of the bed while he was watching to see what those two fish did. And, we all do that, right? While you're going down, soft plastic, weightless. He said he chucked it out, and he said all of a sudden he was like, it's swimming off. and it wasn't the fish that were on the bed.
Yeah.
So he wasn't sight fishing it. He didn't see it. He didn't see the fish get bite. It was a weightless bait. And he said he set the hook. And he said it felt kind of funny. It came in. It was hooked in the side. And he said, yeah. He said, I turned my body and unhooked it just because it's not good to see a fish hooked in the side on the national live stream. But he said his referee cleared it. He cleared it. He wasn't sight fishing for it. It wasn't one of the fish on the beds. And he was cleared by MLF afterwards. So a total non-issue there. But if you just take that 5-second clip, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But like I said, he also said, the guys had an opportunity to practice on that small lake that's on the final day.
Athens,
I think. I saw a number of guys out there before. He said it could be pretty good.
Yeah.
Not giant fish like Lake Fork, but like a lot of really quality
a lot of 4-pounders.
I said, will it take 100 pounds in one day to win that? He said it could.
Yeah.
He said maybe not. He said there's a lot of locals that are fishing it, but he said it could. A lot of 3 to 5 pounders on that lake. So
going to be fun to watch. Really, really going to be. All right, should we give everybody the good news? They've been asking for it, Matthew. And with everything taking place, we're going to make some modifications and try and make some stuff happen over the next week or two or however long. Hopefully this gets much better here in the coming weeks. But Matt and I have talked, and we have decided that we are going to go and try to go to either 4 or 5 shows a week during this period. Matt is not going to drive to the studio on Thursday or Friday. If we go 5 days a week, he's going to be on live via Skype, and then we've figured out a way to where we're going to do the 3-way. If we have a guest, we will have them on live via Skype also, or on the phone line. And then we're going to have some people in studio on the days that Matt is still in Tulsa. But we're going to do everything we can to try and just keep everybody connected with some of the guys during this off period, non-tournament period, and try and get through this together. And hopefully Matt and I and the guests that we have on the show can make things a little bit easier for everybody out there in the bass fishing world to try and get through this very, very challenging situation. So that's kind of the plan. I know Thursday, what we're going to try and do, Thursday we're going to do a Sunline Hotline show. And really want to key on stories from a lot of the fans out there on some of the experiences, good and bad, that you've had on the water. Maybe some funny stories. If obviously you have your thoughts on anything that has taken place in the bass fishing world, we want to hear from that. But just try and have a really feel-good show on Thursday of this week where we showcase some of the fans' great experiences that they've had on the water. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if MLF does make the decision to cancel the remainder of the events in the month of April, then I'm going to really bust my tail to get some people on the show, primarily for storytelling, Matthew, because there's a lot of stories that have happened over a period of time that I think the fans would greatly, greatly appreciate. Obviously, the Mark Davises out there. So many people have so many great stories about their experiences over time in tournament fishing, both on and off the water. So that's kind of the plan. We're going to try and, like I said, get through this thing together, and hopefully we can lighten your day a little bit with what Matt and I do and the guests that we have on this show.
Sounds good.
Right.
We also didn't mention there was the other Toyota series that went out on Okeechobee last week. Didn't get to it with Brad yesterday with Brendan Medlock.
Yeah.
Dude always gets talked about with his jig down there, with what the BPT did and stuff, and then he went out and drilled him 54-4, looking like a mountain man the entire time. Did you see that?
I
He had
did.
like the hair flowing and the beard and stuff, and he's like up in the jungle just like drilling them. It's vintage
good stuff, man.
The dude's good. I mean, he's really good.
Really, really good. All right, coming back with Ken Duke, going to talk a little bit about the industry in these crazy times, folks. Everybody stay tuned on a Tuesday.
The ultimate fishing system starts with Lowrance HDS Live. Upgrade to HDS Live with a Ghost trolling motor, live sight transducer, or Structure Scan 3D, and get up to $500 cash back.
Yeah, You care about gear ratios, inches per turn, and ball bearings, but most importantly, you want reliability and dependability in the equipment you use. Lew's doesn't cut corners when it comes to the gear they build. The new Speed Spool LFS is the best $99 reel in the market. Go see for yourself.
We've paired one of the most iconic hulls in the history of bass boats with a proven lineup of trusted accessories. We're bringing you best-in-class value and performance, leaving others in your wake. Turnkey value, turnkey performance. The Pantera 2 is an overachiever in the 19-foot category. Once you hit the throttle, you'll feel the rush, and there's no looking back.
Kevin, what are you doing here?
Oh, I'm just filling in for Billy.
I need a 660 shad crankbaits in the Series 5 model.
We're out.
You're not out. You got all kinds of them right there.
We're out.
Kevin, I need 6.
Have a lollipop.
I do not want a lollipop.
Have a lollipop.
Do you have it in sexy shad color?
At Duckett Fishing, we have assembled the top pros in the country to help us design rods to give you a competitive advantage. Castability, strength, durability, action, sensitivity, weight and balance, and consistency. Combine that with the best warranty in the industry, and you have rods that are pro-driven.
Duckett Fishing, pro-driven.
I want to share with you a new product we got coming out from Sunline. This is the FC leader size spools that we have now. We've gotten a lot of requests for this. A lot of you guys use fluorocarbon for leaders only, myself included. And one of the problems you have is when you have a 200-yard spool, that might last you 2, 3, 4 years. You might even lose it before you even get done with the spool. So we've gone to a little smaller spool. These are 50-yard spool sizes. You know, that way you're not holding your line on forever. You can keep your line fresh, use it when you can, stores real easily in the boat. We got all of our popular line sizes that you're used to with our Sniper from 5 to 14 pound. If you guys are looking for a line that you're only tying for a leader, go check out Sunline FC Leader 100% fluorocarbon and give it a try.
Blue Water by TH Marine, offering LED lighting solutions for your boat, trailer, truck, ATV, and so much more. Engineered and built to be rugged with waterproof and submersible options. Designed for easy installation, Blue Water is available in a variety of colors and styles. All backed by a limited lifetime warranty. Blue Water by TH Marine.
The name SPRO says it all. SPRO stands for Sports Professionals. When you look at the pro staff that SPRO has brought on board over the past 15 years, it's been pretty incredible. I mean, one got it just then. From the development of the Rock Crawler to the McStick, from the Fat Papa to the Little John series, when you tie a SPRO bait on, you know it's been designed by a professional to get the job done.
While I travel the country on the Bassmaster Elite Series, I simply can't let the weather be the reason I don't win $100,000. That's why I use AFCO clothing to keep me warm, dry, and protected from whatever Mother Nature wants to throw at me. My season depends on it. My career depends on it. AFCO, any fish, any water.
All of us on the Pro Tournament Trail use Gamakatsu hooks.
Why?
Because they are absolutely the best.
It's not about how many bites you get.
It's how many you put in the boat.
Gamakatsu makes hooks for every fishing style.
We didn't come this far to lose fish.
Did you?
For more information, visit gamakatsu.com.
The Big Bite Baits Kamikaze Swim On is a very unique bait, and it's got a full body but with ribs to give it a bigger profile but not more plastic. It's got a jointed tail that gives it a lot of action, as well as this up and down crawl type trail with holes and ribs in it, so it creates a bubble trail almost. This bait is supposed to be fished upside down or vertical like this on a great for a chatterbait. I prefer it on a swim jig as well, but you can also cut it down and put it on the back of a finesse jig. You know, flip it around for some spotted bass or flipping docks. Anytime you want a small, compact, you know, little trailer for it, this is great for it. So check out the full lineup of swim-ons at bigbitebaits.com.
All right, we are back on a Tuesday. Mark and Matt in studio. And we are ready for our special guest. I can get the music turned down. What are you looking at?
You really don't want to know. My buddy sent me a message. It said, me trying to find things to wipe with when all the toilet paper's out, and he's walking down the cactus aisle. It's just very immature and inappropriate.
Jeez.
But you ask, and I'm here to tell you.
All right, it is time to bring in our special guest, and I could think of nobody else to come on the show and talk about just some of the things that are taking place in the industry.
What's the word for that? Why do I lose these words in my head? Is it not it's pertinent, but what does it mean when someone is like
prevalent?
No, prevalent. It's very like when he's up to date and he's like the guy to have on at the time. Like he is, like it's pertinent information, but he is there's a word for it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Maybe Mr. Duke knows it.
The
What
czar?
are you? No.
The czar?
What are you, Ked? You're the...
Well, the key here, guys, as we all know, is I'm available on a Tuesday morning.
Okay, you're available for an interview, but what is it like when you're the authority and like what you're the authority in is like going down? You are it's not
the
pertinent.
Go-to guy. How about that?
What?
Just the go-to guy.
We'll go with that. That's not the word I was going for. Someone will know on the instant feedback.
Relevant.
The most relevant. Yeah.
Okay. No.
That was it.
There's a bunch of them, man. There's a bunch of adjectives.
Hair. Got the best hair in the industry, Matt.
You do.
You guys are covered up with hats. What does that tell you?
Oh, we don't like to do our hair.
Jeffries has a Cornell hockey hat on.
It's my favorite hat, man. Anyway, Ken, thanks for coming on the show. And Matt and I both agree 100%. There's nobody else that could really talk about and discuss from an economic standpoint what your take is from a retail aspect, a wholesale aspect, a manufacturing aspect of this madness that has happened over the past 4 weeks and really going to continue. So why don't we just kind of jump in and get your thoughts on how the industry is dealing with this situation, and is it going to be really, really okay, or is it going to be bad for the industry? What are your thoughts, Ken?
Well, it presents a lot of challenges, and overall, it's certainly not good. Guys, let's start with the manufacturing element of it, because the fishing industry kind of trickles down from there. Wholesalers and dealers, retailers, all require products from manufacturers, and it's perhaps going to be very difficult to get those products. A lot of the factories in China, which make a tremendous amount of the fishing gear that we use, are at very limited production right now. Some of them are at 20% capacity, 40% capacity. That means that a lot of orders that were made months ago are not going to be filled, or that they will not be filled in a timely manner. And that's going to trickle down and impact next the wholesalers and the retailers who need those products to sell. They're not going to have the volume that they're expecting. They're not going to have them perhaps in the time that they need them. You guys know how the fishing industry is. It's pretty cyclical. Right now, March, April, May, that's when a tremendous amount of the sales go on in our industry. A lot of guys are suffering from cabin fever up north, but as ice melts and water warms and seasons come in, they want to go fishing. And if they don't have the gear to do so, it's going to be a big problem.
Ken, from a recessionary period, this industry has been through a lot over the years, but this thing happened so quick. And think about the crowd that was just weeks ago at the Bassmaster Classic buying up everything. I mean, stuff was flying off the shelf. What's your thoughts based upon things that have happened in the past from a recessionary standpoint?
Well, we've had big economic setbacks. There were, 2008 was a major economic setback. That hurt the fishing industry a great deal. 9/11 hurt the fishing industry a great deal. We saw boat and big ticket tackle items, the sales for those things go down significantly, and it hurt a lot. We've recovered from that. We've been in an area, in a time of relative prosperity in the fishing industry for a while, but coronavirus could be undoing a lot of that and setting a lot of things back. We may see some small and medium-sized tackle companies, manufacturers, go completely out of business as a result of this if authorities can't get the coronavirus under control pretty soon.
People are still going to fish. At least that's the vibe that I get from a lot of people, especially with so many places across the country closing down. So from that aspect, I think as long as people have a job and have money, that to get through this time, they're going to spend, I think, a lot of time on the water. Hence, hopefully the dollar amount of sales will follow that practice. But at the same time, as recovery takes place, hopefully in a short period of time, the dramatic effect that the economy is going to have as a result of this, it's kind of an unknown right now what the long-term effects are going to be. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right about that, Mark. We don't know what the long-term effects are going to be because we don't know how long these manufacturing facilities are going to be operating at less than full capacity. We don't know how long Americans, and we represent the bulk of the sport fishing industry in the world, but also this is a global problem presenting global issues. We don't know how long the U.S. is basically going to be not shut down, but we're seeing unprecedented levels of business closings due to a health epidemic, and that's scary stuff. My wife and I went into Orlando. We live in the Orlando area the other day. I needed to stop by an office supply store. We wanted to go in a bookstore, and the bookstore closed as we got there. Closed way early. The streets were largely empty. A town like Orlando, which relies so heavily on transportation and on tourism, is going to be hit really hard. Now, the fishing industry, to your point, hopefully is not going to be hit so hard. People can still go fishing. You're not gathered in groups of 250 or more unless you're at a tournament registration. And I know that hits you guys pretty hard, but most of the fishing industry is not that. So the opportunity to go fishing is still going to be out there. But are people going to go to the retail outlets and pick up new gear, or are they going to make do with what they've got to avoid contact with other people? I don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping to go fishing this weekend, but whether I stop in at a tackle shop on the way or not is something I haven't decided yet.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're planning on going to the St. Johns River, you cannot sight fish in Lake George because that's 50 or more people in a close confined area, Ken. That would totally go against the CDC regulation.
Actually, it's 10 now, Matthew.
Oh, 10. Yeah, you're really screwed.
Ken, have you spoke with any of the company representatives on what the situation is like over in China now? Because we're hearing that they're kind of getting back into the flow of things in China. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I have been in contact with a number of the manufacturers who have a lot of their stuff made in China. We've got a big feature coming out in the April issue of Fishing Tackle Retailer magazine on coronavirus and what it's doing to the fishing industry. And just to give you guys a brief understanding of what I understand the situation to be in China is, you have a big holiday last month, Chinese New Year, and the country basically shuts down for Chinese New Year. Most of the manufacturing plants, not just for the fishing industry, but for all the stuff we use day to day in our modern lives, are near the coast. But a lot of the workers are from non-coastal areas. They leave their jobs at the coast. They go to their homes. They spend a few weeks there. Sometimes they come back to work. Sometimes they get a better offer, a better job, and they don't come back. There is a natural period of adjustment after that as these manufacturing facilities regroup, hire new people, get back up to speed, and they try to work quickly to catch up for that lost time. It takes a while. It's taking an extra long amount of time now because these facilities are not at capacity right now, because a lot of people didn't come back because there are serious travel restrictions in China. China is obviously a different form of government than we have here, but in China, there are travel bans. You go city to city based on what sort of permits you have. They check your health as you travel from city to city. Instead of taking days to get from your home to your job on the coast, it is now taking weeks in many cases. So these are serious problems. And if they were just in China, I could say, well, a lot of the manufacturers who have stuff made elsewhere are not being impacted. But almost everybody is being impacted in some capacity. And now we're seeing even American manufacturing impacted by the coronavirus, because people are telling their employees to stay home, to stay away from the plants and offices and schools, because it does present a risk of spreading coronavirus. This is a big deal, an unprecedented deal, and a lot of what we're talking about here, we're basing it on very incomplete information. So we're making our best guesses as to what it's going to do to our economy and the fishing industry at large.
Ken, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I have always been intrigued by how the term and the situation of debt operates in the fishing industry, both from a retail perspective and from a manufacturing perspective. Is this a situation where companies are not going to be able to absorb the amount of debt that they have based upon this situation, or do you see an ease maybe from an accounts receivable status on some of the retail outlet stores, instead of holding it out 120 days or 90 days, that they may actually help out the manufacturers to get cash flow going? Or is this a situation where debt is going to be king and it's really going to kill a lot of companies in this business?
Well, certainly debt is going to be impacted here, and the companies that are more agile or that have bigger bankrolls and so forth are going to be in a better position. But I'm not sure that debt per se is the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue moving forward is going to be whether or not there's product to move and sell. It's not so much going to be an issue of when this stuff has to be paid for as it is if it's a month late, if it's 2 months late, have you missed your season to sell it?
Yeah.
And therefore, do you no longer want it? Do you cancel your order? Not perhaps because you can't afford it, but because you can't sell it now, or because you can't get it in a timely manner. You're not doing enough business to keep the doors open and the lights on. I'm not sure that debt is the biggest issue. I think moving forward, perhaps the biggest issue is simply supply and ultimately demand as well.
All right. Do the online retailers really come out of this better than the brick and mortars?
If they have supplies, but in many cases they're in exactly the same boat, no pun intended. These guys can't sell what they don't have. And if they don't have it, or they didn't place an order early enough, then they've got a predicament. What we're finding in the tackle industry and in my work with fishing tackle retailer is that a lot of companies are saying, hey, we placed a big order back in August, back in July, and that order has already come in. It came in advance of Chinese New Year. So we're looking good. We're feeling strong, and good for them. Good for them. They're gonna come out ahead in this situation. But not a lot of companies had the deep pockets to do that. Because to do that, A, it means you had to have a lot of liquidity back in the summer to place these orders early, and B, you had to have the warehousing to store the stuff. And one of the keys to effective wholesaling, retailing, and even manufacturing is managing inventory. You don't want a lot of inventory just sitting around, taking up space, being on your insurance, being on your rent, and so forth. So that's not a typical practice in the industry to keep a lot of stuff on hand just in case of a situation like this.
Yeah, bad deal. All right, typically, historically, and you would know, whatever the winning bait or baits is in the Bassmaster Classic, typically do we not see a bump immediately following that event? And with the case this year, what's the situation with the historical data that we've seen in the bump in the lures that have won the Bassmaster Classic?
Well, you're absolutely right, of course, Mark. There is always a bump whenever somebody wins a classic, especially if they win a classic on a new or relatively unknown lure that guys don't have sitting in their tackle box. I mean, if somebody wins a classic on a Zoom trick worm, I'm guessing Matt Pangrak has approximately 10,000 Zoom trick worms.
Only big bite, Ken. Only big bite.
I'm sorry, my bad. Okay, I've got 1 million.
Come on, man.
But something like that. But if you
sold all the Zooms, just gave them away.
Something like that, then it's not such a big deal. But in addition to the bump, I would say that boost to sales on a classic winning lure has diminished somewhat over the years.
Okay.
And it's because anglers are smarter, more savvy, better educated than they've ever been. We know there's no magic lure. We know that there are a lot of great baits on the market, and sometimes what a guy is throwing is not so much the absolute best bait for the technique he's using, but simply what a sponsor wants him to throw and so forth. So the bump has been diminished over the last 30 years and probably will continue to be diminished. But anytime it's a new bait, anytime maybe it's a new color, something like that, you're going to see a boost. And whether or not those companies are going to be able to supply that boost is going to be interesting, and it's going to be heavily tied to this coronavirus situation.
I don't know if I agree with Ken on that, because I recently saw a Mighty Bite commercial, and it looked pretty magical to me.
Hey, you can jump in here anytime you want.
Also, here's the next question I want. So live now, with all these championship events in the Bassmaster.
Wait a minute, we're live? We can't edit this out?
No. With the advent of live. So now we're 5-6 years into it, to where everyone knew what Hank Cherry was throwing. I mean, everyone knew what Randy Howell was throwing in 2014. And I would assume, is it easier to track when, say, Jay Yellis wins a classic on a jig, and then you have the orders of the jigs, and you can tell how many it sells, as opposed to the jerkbait that Hank Cherry was throwing that people were ordering literally before he had won the classic even, or 10 minutes after he catches a fish? I mean, with the live, you know what it is, when it is, and there's a million different places that you can get it. So how do you gauge how much of that is sold when it's so immediately readily available? Literally, as he's catching the fish, you can have that bait to your door the next day.
Well, you can if there are supplies available, and of course there were supplies available for most of these baits. I think it's always been impossible to perfectly track sales increases based upon winning a big tournament like the Bassmaster Classic. I think that's always going to be elusive. But these companies, especially a big company like a Pure Fishing or Pradco, they have certain expenditures through their marketing and advertising efforts, and they have an expectation of what the sales are going to do. And then they see where the sales actually are, and they probably attribute that to the classic win. Whether these increased sales happen on March 6th, day one of the classic, or they happen a month or 2 months later when the story hits Bassmaster Magazine and Bass Times, is another matter. But I think there's a lot of speculation, and it's based and countered by what they spent already in marketing.
Mr. Duke, I would like to know in your opinion, the biggest classic winning bait that was a bust, that got no bump for the win, and then the most influential classic winning bait that you think the classic win got the most bang for the buck for that bait.
Off the top of my head, I would say that a couple of the baits that didn't get the huge boost were obviously something like the Smithwick Rogue that Kevin Van Dam threw in 2005. I mean, the Rogue's always been a really popular bait, but the one Kevin used to win that tournament was no longer in production. It was made with different plastic. So, and they didn't necessarily jump in and put that thing back into production that way. So did that really boost it? I don't know. I'm sure a lot of Smithwick Rogues were sold. It's a fabulous jerkbait. Another one would be the Casey Ashley horsehead jig that he fished and that his dad made. Now, right after that, Casey was working with TTI Blakemore to create a Casey's Classic Runner. But, you know, production lags a little bit and so forth. I hope TTI Blakemore sold 1 billion of the things, but I'm not sure how that worked out. Then you get a situation like Edwin Evers winning the Classic in 2016 with an Andes custom jig. I don't think that they were necessarily able to keep up with the production necessary to really sell a lot of those baits. I think a lot of other companies, their rivals, were able to get some of that living rubber out there faster. They had fewer barriers to the market. They had better distribution. And so maybe they didn't capitalize on it the way they wanted to. As far as which bait might have had the biggest boost, I'm gonna go a little bit different on your question, Matt, and I'm going to say that when Jack Chancellor won the 1985 Classic, he put Carolina rigging on the map like never before and never since. I think for the next 15 years, I never stepped into a boat with a guy who didn't have at least one Carolina rig, and I had one partner who got in the boat with me a few years after that in a tournament. He had 10 rods, 9 of them had a Carolina rig on.
That was me. That was me. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does.
Hang on a second, Matt. There
I
is
was thinking,
one. Let's do this. All right,
it's right
Ken,
there.
Ken, the one that sticks out to my mind is Ken Cook's win.
Look what's written down right there.
Yeah,
Ken Cook, Hart.
That made that company. That company doesn't exist unless Ken Cook does what he did and wins the Bassmaster Classic.
Okay.
Do you not agree with that?
I can't speak to whether the Hart Company is still in business.
It is, barely, but it is.
I don't think they make that particular bait anymore. I understand that it did sell some baits, but I had a friend of mine who's a very knowledgeable dude in the tackle industry, and he once said this to me. It's always stuck with me. He said, unless your lure's for sale in Walmart, you really don't sell a lot of them. And
okay,
in point. But yeah, Hart did very well with that. Obviously, most companies do very well with that classic winning lure. Mm-hmm. I think that that bump has been less significant over the years, but there have certainly been, everybody's benefited from it. And of course, going back to Matt's question for a moment, the folks that didn't get the boost were the ones where the pro who won the tournament didn't actually tell anybody what he was using. Often lied about what they were using. Usually came up with the story of, well, I was using my sponsor's new prototype. When those of us in the media who were there realized, no, that's not a prototype. That's somebody else's thing, we think. But because we can't prove it and can't report on it, the public at large doesn't know about it. And the company that made the actual bait that won the tournament isn't benefiting. And that happened 20% of the time back in the day before there was a camera on every boat. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah.
Who lied the most?
Probably even more than that. I would say more than that, Ken, because they had the capabilities of hiding everything. Mm-hmm. And that was huge, and obviously they were reaping the benefits from sponsorship, but at the same time they were trying to catch everything they could and sometimes it just wasn't a right fit with what they were being compensated
Now, let me
for.
ask you this, and I'm thinking, and you mentioned a jig there. Pace one in 13. He had that jig there. Jordan Lee on Conroe with that kind of mop jig. Edwin Evers with that Andy's jig that you mentioned. Do you think since that 05-06 where they had the two classics, the Classic one in the spring and stuff, you go to that February-March timeframe, do you think that the baits have become less important and more niche baits than when it was in a summer classic where you saw a lot more techniques being used? Do you think the bait has become less important or as less bang for the buck since the classic moved to the early spring and kind of narrowed the limited what type of bait could win the classic?
Well, the type of bait that can win the classic has always been impacted by the timing of the classic. And the classic from 1971 until 1982 was a fall affair. A lot of different baits in the mix, some soft plastics, some spinner baits, a lot of spinner baits, some crank baits. Then from the early 80s until 2005, it was a summertime event. A lot of soft plastics again. Then in 2006, it becomes a late winter, very early spring event. I think that the combination of time of year, it's always limiting what can win the classic. The fact that the audience is becoming more intelligent and less likely to believe in a magic lure, that cuts down on the impact that a bait has. And also, when we've got these classics that are late winter, very, very early spring, and jigs come into play, hey, I love throwing a jig as much as the next guy. I think a jig is a fabulous tournament lure, a fabulous big bass bait, but few baits are less sexy than a jig. Few baits are harder to differentiate than a jig. You get right down to it, a jig is a hunk of lead or tungsten with a hook out of it and a hook coming out of it and a skirt. Usually they put a trailer on it. If you want to argue with me that this jig is better than that jig, I might believe you. I certainly have my favorites, but it's hard to differentiate a jig.
So, what I'm getting from this whole conversation is Hank Cherry wins. Yeah, he throws a crankbait, but he primarily throws a jerkbait. What you're saying is, recently, let's say it was a Megabass 110 +1. Pradco's benefiting. Pure Fishing's benefiting. Spro's benefiting. Megabass is benefiting. You're seeing an uptick in jerkbait sales in the category, not just the exact specific jerkbait, because the people are able to watch it live, they're more educated, and now that technique and those style of baits are on their radar more so than the specific bait.
Yes, and I'll add one more thing to your fabulous assessment, Matt Pangrack. I will add this. The companies that make the most out of it are the ones that have the best marketing departments and the best spend out there. It's one thing to win a tournament on a bait. It's quite another to have the apparatus and the team and the marketing skills and all that and the advertising budget to really get out there, make it known, and benefit from it. So that's the other aspect that we haven't mentioned yet.
I have one more question, and this is just purely I want to know this. What is the biggest controversy surrounding a winning classic bait in classic history over the past 50 years?
Woo!
In your opinion, this is strictly just your opinion.
The biggest controversy.
As far as, can you believe he said that? Like, Tim Tucker comes off the water and he's like, I was in the boat with that guy and he wasn't throwing that at all. But that's what comes out as the classic winning bait or something like that.
There was a controversy in 2008 with Alton Jones and the mop jig versus the Booyah AJ jig or whatever. They named it a couple of things. There was controversy in 2006 when Luke Clausen won on a man's hard-nosed worm. Was it really a gambler? Those are a couple that come to mind that are fairly recent.
Old school, Ken. Old school. You got to know the history of the old school, because that's when you could flat out just say, I caught it on this, and you caught it on something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, Rayo Breckenridge in 1973 said that he triggered all his bites by throwing a crankbait. He said he had to throw a crankbait into his area, but he actually caught all his fish on a jelly worm. But he still had to mention the crankbaits because I guess they were a big sponsor. I don't know, man. What do you think? Are you getting at something specific?
No, I'm asking you because you know every classic winning bait sets Bobby Murray what on Mead.
I think because guys were able to get away with things more in the 70s, 80s, and 90s than they are today, maybe the controversies were not as significant. It was very, very limited. There was one guy on the boat with the winner. He was a media person from God knows where. He wasn't a BASS photographer or videographer. He was some dude who was working for a newspaper from, Bloomington, Illinois.
So this is a Steve Price question.
This is a Steve Price question, but I'll tell you what, Steve Price is a tremendously ethical reporter and journalist. And I know that he has had some issues with guys in the past where he would look at what they were throwing and then he would ask them what they were throwing. And if there was a discord in it, he wouldn't go to print until he had everything nailed down. But sometimes that meant leaving something unnamed.
I got you.
And I think probably in a majority of classics, especially in the last 20 years, guys have named the 3 or 4 sponsor products they've used, and then they'll say, and an unnamed jerkbait, and an unnamed jig. And that's always interesting to me because that says as much about what they were using as anything else. If it was significant enough to single it out, but not name the brand and model, I kind of want to know about that. And I've tried to track those down through the years. And I found some misprints in Bassmaster magazine. Not misprints, but some situations where it was misreported.
Right.
And the classic winner has ultimately told me, well, no, I wasn't throwing that at all. I don't know where they got that idea, but it was always published that it was a Johnson Silver minnow with a Hildebrandt spinner in front of it, but it was actually a Rex spoon. And that's Bobby Murray in 1978 who said that.
Stuff.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me, and that's why I've spoken with all the old classic champs who are still with us, and I enjoy those conversations so much, and I learned so much that was misreported at the time.
Now, you have spreadsheets. I mean, you have actual binders, books of everyone. You've tracked them down, talked to them individually. You have extensive lists of every single bait and color and line and rod and reel and lure and hook and everything that they've used, that they've personally looked you in the eye and told you what it is. And, those are probably in those, locked green binders behind you in your very unique camera angle. But I mean, you can't just look that up online. You are literally the only person that has that, right?
I am the only person who has that. I don't think anybody else has wasted enough of their youth, middle age, and now my old age gathering that stuff. But Matt, actually, these are part of the next big project I want to work on. This is my data on world record and record class largemouth bass. That's my next thing is a real meaningful understanding of record class largemouth bass and then smallmouth and eventually spots.
I remember that.
But yeah, the classic fascinates me, and I take a lot of pride in gathering information on the classic. And Matt, you've seen parts of my database on the classic.
I got one more way on this, but go ahead, Mark. Get yours in, and then we'll...
I was just going to say, over the years, especially old school, when it came to the jig, Ken, it was always the throwdown was, it's a homemade jig. That's what they would always say. Oh, it's a homemade jig.
Yeah.
I did it on my own. I poured it on my own.
Bradley still says that about his jig.
I know.
Bradley says, quote, "You can have anything in my box except my homemade jigs."
Yeah. So that's kind of how they got away with that. All right.
So you talk about these statistics. This is something. You got a couple minutes here?
Sure.
You don't have to go to school, do you?
No, we're good, man.
Okay, so this has bothered me. Once I had you on, we want to get the business stuff out of the way with Mark. We wanted to talk the classic stuff out of the way, but this is something that I've wanted to talk with you about for a year, and it's kind of bugged me. All right, I got to set the stage. Bassmaster Elite Series. Pay your entry fee, whatever it is, $5,000, and they said, hey, we're going to give you $2,500 back every single tournament. Well, that goes down as a cash check in earnings. So for years, you had the guys paid the entry fees. You had to finish in the top third. And I know there's some variation based on opens and invitationals, 250, 100 boats, all the way up to 87 or 86 when it was the Elite Series. But now you've got every single guy in the field, and if you finish 83rd or 82nd, your earnings are still counting, and it's still counting as a cash check. Now you've got guys over at MLF who have rewritten the record books at Bass, who you don't know where to put them historically as far as what? You make a cut in a round, but then you start over, but then you make a top 10 and you have total weight. How do you put that in perspective? And then I look at the history of sports, and this bothers me. Maybe me and Ken are the only two that it bothers, guaranteed. We're the only two it bothers in the world. But you look at the history of, and I'm going to use golf and baseball and not compare, but just saying, you take the Ken Rosenthals and the guys who have it, and part of the mystique and the aura and that makes people proud to be a part of that sport is the rich history of golf, where they're talking about St. Andrews and Augusta and all this stuff that goes back for 75 years. Someone else trying to call Mr. Duke? Did he freeze on me? He froze on me right in the middle of my rant. It was a good rant, wasn't it, Mark?
I don't know what's up with that. That's kind of weird.
Did you like my rant, though?
Oh, he's back now.
You back now?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Don't know what happened.
Okay, so I'll start. So part of the thing that I think makes so many people loyal to baseball and golf is the rich history that goes back 100 years. You can say this happened in 1902, this, and that makes them proud to be a part of that. Fishing is 50 years, and I think that the history of fishing is vastly underrated because it's a what have you done for me lately? And, I've watched Dion Hibden walk around the Classic Expo, Bobby Murray walk around the Classic Expo, and they didn't get stopped as often as, obviously a Gerald Swindle or anything, because those are the guys now. Those are legends of the sport who have won classics and tournaments, Anglers of the Year. How do you put right now and what's happening in our sport in perspective in the history books moving forward to maintain the integrity and put into perspective how impressive what Edwin did on the BPT was, or what Zaldane did or Canterbury did on the Elite Series last year without getting it just a completely jumbled mess? It's a long question for probably short answer.
No, I think I know where you're going with this, and it's a difficult thing to do, to put it in perspective. When Ray Scott put his first tournament on Beaver Lake back in 1967, there was a 15 bass limit. It stayed 15 for a couple of years. It dropped to 10, then it dropped to 7. But it wasn't until 1992, far more recent than most people realize, that BASS went finally to a 5-fish limit. Those were differences in degree. With MLF and the Bass Pro Tour, we have a difference in type. It is not a revision to the game. It's a different game. It's an entirely different game. And I think that to treat it like it's the same game is not only inappropriate, but wildly misleading. And I think that it's a similar game in some ways, but it's a different game. One of the things that troubles me about this new game is when people tell me that the BPT anglers or MLF anglers are catching just as many bigger or quality fish as they were before. Because I don't believe that for a second. And my best example for that would be when Edwin Evers won the Red Crest last fall. He made a long run, went into this creek on the Mississippi River, and he just started whacking the 1 and 1.5 pound fish. Mm-hmm. Now, if he'd already had a limit in his boat of 5 fish, or let's say he capped out his limit there, he might have caught fish 6, 7, 8, 9 just to see if there were any bigger fish there, but he would have left. There's no way he'd have caught 40 in that spot. And by leaving, he'd be leaving to give himself a chance to catch a kicker, to improve his overall catch and so forth. So these guys are not catching the same number of quality fish that the guys fishing a 5-fish limit are. They're not, because it's not productive to do so. As anglers, and your audience knows this, it's a lot easier to catch 10 1-pound fish than it is to catch 1 5-pound fish. And so I think the way to look at this stuff in a historical perspective is to say that it is a different game.
So start over.
I start over.
So you start over with a blank book and what Edwin did last year with winning the Red Crest, winning the regular season, and winning the points title is not, and I'm just saying this from a historical perspective, is not the most impressive thing in the history of professional bass fishing. It is the most impressive thing on the BPT under that format, and it writes chapter 1 of a blank book that literally starts in 2019, and that perspective then will only be looked at 10 years down the road when you have enough data to go back and analyze how impressive his season was last year.
Exactly. And to add one thing to what you just said there, Matt, here's what's kind of bizarrely interesting to me in a strange way that maybe a lot of people have not thought of quite like this. So I'll throw it out there. When MLF invited all those anglers to join the BPT now going on 2 years ago, the biggest names in the sport left BASS. And 68 of the biggest names in the sport left BASS to go and do that. They were recognized, or we would have generally called them the best bass fishermen on the planet, or at least many of the best bass fishermen on the planet. But you know what? They just changed the game. And are they the best at this new game? Well, what we're finding out is that, yeah, Edwin Evers is the best at this new game, just like he was the best, one of the best at the old game with a 5-fish limit. But a lot of these guys in the new game just suck, who were really good at the old game, but now they suck.
That's what I said as far as statistically, and that's why, because you're the statistics guy and you see people trying to translate the statistics from this 5-fish limit over to the no limit, the catch away release, and here's the way I equated it. Like I said, this isn't a knock. I'm just trying to put all this in historical context. You understand what I'm saying, Mark?
Man, we are on a tangent from a very, very long question, but continue.
Is it good or bad? Should we stop, or the people saying move on?
Keep going.
Here's the way I look at it. World's strongest man. You get on there, Thor Svensson from Sweden. He spent 80 years eating all this protein to lift a 500-pound rock on a stand one time, right? All his energy has been focused on lifting this giant-ass rock, and people from all over go to the world's strongest man because they want to see this guy lift this damn giant rock that no one else could lift up on top, and he can do it faster, quicker, stronger than anyone else. That's the 5-fish limit on the Elite Series guys. Now they go to the World's Strongest Man competition. They say, we're going to lift 10 50-pound rocks. It's still going to equal 500 pounds, but Thor, who's really good at lifting the 500-pound rock, might suck at lifting 10 50-pound rocks because he's out of breath. He hasn't trained on that. His endurance isn't there. He's good at lifting one heavy rock, not 10 smaller rocks. And, Tommy from frickin' Detroit, who couldn't lift the rock, now all of a sudden is really good at lifting 10 50-pound rocks and beats Thor.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. It's a different game. And
are we going to have to cut that part out, Mark? Why are you chuckling at me?
It's just
You're
funny,
chuckling
man.
at me.
Thor.
Well, we're kind of...
I never thought we'd talk about Thor and bass fishing on the same show.
I met one of the fans of BTL. His name was Thor. I just thought about that. Yeah, he's the dude with the beard, remember?
Oh, yeah.
He has his own YouTube channel and stuff. Yeah.
All right.
He's a good dude. Anyway, back to that. You could cut this part out if you want. We're kind of geeking out over it, but I've always wanted to... I've talked about it.
There you have it. Your request has been answered. There we have it. All right, Ken.
Wait, no, you got to respond to that.
To Thor?
No, to the whole analogy.
Well, I'll mention this. Because the proving grounds, the training grounds, the qualifying grounds for MLF are the 5-fish limit, we may never really see the most gifted anglers at catching a multitude of 1 or 2 pound fish because they have no way to get there. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like they changed the game, but they haven't changed the grassroots of the game because it's so difficult technologically to run a tournament like MLF and BPT are doing. We may never get the guys who are truly the best. And we've got some great bass fishermen. I mean, Kevin Van Dam, Edwin Evers, Aaron Martins. These are the best in the business. We've recognized them as so for decades. And we've seen some guys who are really good in this new format, but we have not established a training and proving ground for that next generation to come in and maybe take it to another level.
This is a great segue to know that I just posted the Podunkers Fishing League on YouTube, where I fish the MLF format in a 10-boat championship, catch, weigh, release, and input your weights at the end of each period. And I happened to win that tournament, so who knows what's in my future now, Mark.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right, Ken, a lot of people on the instant feedback, including myself, want to know how much of this is going to impact ICAST. And I know you're heavily involved with ICAST. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, just for a little background, guys, I'm on the ASA Trade Show Committee, which does oversee ICAST and so forth. And we always have a meeting at the Bassmaster Classic, usually Thursday afternoon. We had our usual Thursday afternoon meeting, and we spent a significant amount of time right at the outset talking about coronavirus and what impact it might have and what we need to do regarding ICAST. First, I'll tell you that ICAST is a go. We are still on for July in Orlando, and nothing has changed. We're still very optimistic that the situation will be under control by that time, or certainly abated enough that ICAST is going to happen right on schedule. By the same token, we're keeping our eye on the situation. We're monitoring what other organizations are doing, what the Surgeon General and other medical authorities are saying about it, and we're looking at what the industry is telling us about the event. So while I am very optimistic that we're going to have ICAST, we're also looking at the situation and going to be agile and ready to change that plan if necessary. I would say that on a practical level, because of the way those large convention centers like the Orange County Convention Center work, postponing something like ICAST is probably not an option. You can't say, hey, we're just going to move it back a month because somebody else has got the venue that time. So if the situation is still dire at that point, then you have to cancel things like trade show meetings, like big athletic events where the arena is maybe already leased out to something else. But I'm optimistic that we're going to have ICAST. It's going to be in July. It's going to be in Orlando. It's going to be well attended.
All right. Let's see here on the instant feedback. A lot of people want to know any thoughts on what this situation, especially the situation with oil prices, is going to do to the bass boat industry.
Well, oil prices dropping, gas prices are dropping. That's always, they're trying to stimulate sales, obviously, and one way to do that is by dropping prices. And maybe people are going to see an opportunity to go fishing because it's not a collective group activity for the most part. Like to Matt's point, unless you're sight fishing in the St. John's. But I'm hopeful it'll do good things for fishing. I'm hopeful that people will revert to the outdoors because it is something you can still do despite the coronavirus risk. Like I said, I'm planning on going this weekend if I can get away.
Yeah. Do you have bread and milk, Ken?
You'd have to ask my wife.
Did you go to the grocery store? Was it chaos in Orlando?
It is chaos in Orlando. My wife went to the grocery store yesterday, but what's chaos in Orlando is we drove into town on Sunday afternoon late, and there was no traffic. And Orlando usually has traffic issues because it's such a tourist hotspot.
Yeah.
And we got to the office supply store, and there was basically nobody there. When we go to a bookstore, which shouldn't have been closing until a couple of hours later, and they were shutting the doors right then. They've reduced their hours indefinitely moving forward. So, and then we go to we went to one of our favorite little restaurants. Nothing fancy, just a Sweet Tomatoes, a soup and salad kind of place, and they closed the doors right after we walked in at about 7, and while we were eating our meal, they told us they were going to be closing at least for the next 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that was kind of an eye-opener. That was coronavirus quite literally hitting a home, or at least hometown for me.
Yeah. All right, man. What's your plans, Ken? I mean, what are you going to do during this whole thing?
Work like a dog. Got a lot of stuff to do to get the next issue of FTR out the door. I'm going to be thinking about the fishing industry, talking with people about the fishing industry. I work from home anyway, so hopefully I have a chance to visit with you guys about some things. And hopefully we'll start to see the coronavirus situation get better. Looking out for the family here. Hopefully get a chance to do a little bit of fishing. And beyond that, just look for the light at the end of this tunnel.
All right, man. We definitely want to get you back on the show here maybe in a week or two as this thing hopefully starts to settle down a little bit and just once again get the vibe on what's going down in the industry from all three aspects, the manufacturing, retail, and wholesale. We didn't really talk about the wholesalers. Is that something to be concerned about? I know this whole thing is being driven by demand, but what's the situation with the wholesalers?
Well, I would say it's actually, ironically, it's being more perhaps driven by supply at the moment. People still want things. People are still reading about things, seeing things in videos and learning about things. But there may be a challenge in them getting the things.
Yeah.
The wholesaler is the wholesaler obviously is the point between manufacturing and retail, and it's in the same situation as manufacturing right now. If they can't get the product, they can't sell the product. So it's a bad situation for everybody in the chain.
All right, dude, man, hunker down. And as always, man, greatly appreciate you coming on the show, Ken.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me. A big fan of BTL, as you both know. Big fan of Matt Pangrak's Strange Questions.
All right, man. Take care, Kenny.
Hey, take care, guys.
All right,
Always
see you.
Thanks.
All right, there you have it, Ken Duke, and the authority when it comes to anything fishing tackle related.
Was I a loose cannon during that interview?
They were wanting to know how many Red Bulls you had this morning.
I had half of one. Let's get fired up when someone can answer my questions.
Jeez,
was it that bad?
Question, man.
Was it
quite
that bad?
Question. No, just quite the question.
I mean, okay.
And the other thing too that we didn't mention, or you remember, last year was kind of a unique perspective from weights and everything, because it was 1 pound, and this year they've went to at least a 2 pound, and then who knows? I mean, they have the availability to make changes, whatever body of water that they go to or whatever. So I don't know from an earnings standpoint, which that's what I thought your question was.
Well, that was
directed.
part of it, yeah.
From an earnings perspective, can you compare apples to apples in both tours?
Right. And my main point was when Tiger Woods did what Tiger Woods did, it was impressive because of the extensive history of the sport leading up to that, correct?
Yeah.
If there was no way to put into context what a Andre Agassi or the Tiger or Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan did, then they're scoring a lot of points and they're winning championships, but you don't know how good it is. So I think that's part of the deal with the MLF Bass Pro Tour is because of how it's changed, the context around it is hard to figure out, how good is this?
Yeah, but it's a win, still not a win.
That's what I'm saying. It's still impressive. It's still impressive if you score 50 points, but if you can say, hey, he's the only guy to score 50 points in a finals in 35 years.
Yeah, all right, let me throw this out at you. Can you compare it to when the NBA did not have the three-point line back in the Jerry West era, Gail Goodrich, John Havlicek, all those guys? Can you compare those players because the game has totally changed?
If you look at the guys who do statistics, a lot of times on the ESPN and stuff, they'll say in the modern era. Or they'll say in the three-point line era.
Yeah.
So they actually do,
recognize
the difference in that.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's never been perfect in fishing, like you pointed out. 7 fish, 15 fish, 3-day tournaments, 4-day tournaments, guys fishing all sorts of stuff. So it won't ever be, like an ERA or the baseball stuff that's hardly ever changed.
Yeah.
But that was my whole point. And there's one guy in the world who knows how to put all that in context, and it's the guy we just had on.
That is correct. All right, that's going to wrap things up here on a Tuesday. Tomorrow, hopefully, let's keep our fingers crossed, the Bassmaster Classic champion, Mr. Hank Cherry, going to be on the show tomorrow. I know he's been ill. He's had the flu, and I know his family's been sick too. So hopefully we will get him on, and then we will be on Thursday. We're going to do a Sunline Hotline show, and then Friday, speaking of authorities on subject matter, is there anybody else better than this guy?
Authorities? No, not at all. He is the man.
He is the man. We're talking about Gene Gilliland.
One of the best guys to spend a day in the boat with.
Yeah,
you can ask him
biology.
anything about fish, and he'll know.
We're going to have him in studio on Friday, so 5 shows this week. Everybody, we're going to get through this. Let's work together and make the best that we can out of a very, very challenging situation. So, once again, big thanks to Ken Duke. That's it. We're out of here.